Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of HSP TV. I am your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by the wonderful Miriam Gilbert, and we are going to be talking about change corporate to change the world. And what we mean by that, we're going to explain in a second, so stay tuned. But first, let's welcome Miriam. And I'm very happy that you're here because I think this is a very important topic because corporate has such a huge place in our world and they really have the power to change things, right?
That's right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your program. I'm really delighted because I know that you're somebody who stands for doing things differently and being very different from the norm cookie cutter people who are out there. So it
Yes.
really resonated with me, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity because I love talking about how if we change corporates, we can change the world. You just said corporates have a massive impact. I mean, they are everywhere, right? Like everything we do, the phone that we have in our hands built by a corporate, the cars we drive, every single thing we do is run by corporates. So yes,
Yeah.
they have a massive impact.
Yes, exactly. And I think also the vast majority of people are still employed by
Yeah.
corporate.
Yes, that is true. And even, I mean, there's huge numbers that are employed by corporates. There are many companies that have 100,000 employees around the world. But
Mhm.
even if you think, even those people who are not necessarily employed directly, they're dependent indirectly on those people in corporate. So
Yes.
the chain of impact is massive.
Mhm. Yes, exactly. And there is a lot of difference between corporates, right? You have corporates who are all about the money, and you have corporates who are polluting the world. You have corporates that are very environmental aware and try to be as green as possible. You have a wide variety of corporates.
You absolutely do. And, I have found that while there are some companies who have a really cutthroat culture, like the one that you see in the movies, there are some, but they are actually not the norm. Most corporate organizations don't really have a culture of being complete arseholes. Most have just a meh culture, something that's not very inspiring. And inside there are some arseholes in there, but there's also a lot of really good people. I mean, you
Mhm.
can't have, 20,000, 50,000 employees and every single one of them being a bad person, right?
No.
That's very unlikely.
Yes, but what I also saw when I was working in corporate is that the assholes are usually at management level.
They can be, but in my experience, I actually have met more managers who are good people who are just stuck in really crappy situations and systems than people who are real, nasty people.
That's
And
true.
it's very rare.
Yes, that is true. My direct manager, I called him an asshole, but he's actually a really nice guy. But he was just being micromanaged by the director of the company, and he didn't have any say. And I accused him of not having any balls and standing up to corporate to fight for what is right. That
Mm,
was, in my eyes, the biggest problem with him. And what I also see, especially I come from the IT sector, is especially here in the Netherlands, we have this culture of you constantly need to promote, you need to upgrade, you need to
mm,
work the ladder, right? You need to
yeah,
grow. So what happens is that you start out, for instance, as a programmer and a junior programmer, then you become a media programmer, then a senior programmer. But when you're a senior programmer, a lot of people get pushed into becoming a manager of the department.
yeah.
But most programmers are scoring high on the autistic
Mhm, yeah.
spectrum. And that usually is not the best combination with managing.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And a lot of career paths have the same problem. I've worked a lot, well, I'm a chartered accountant by background, so finance. Same thing. exactly the same. And again, the accountants are not known to be great people managers, right?
Yes.
Um, I've worked with a lot of lawyers, same thing. I've also worked with a lot of engineers, like, construction engineers and all that, same thing. And I don't think a, it's not the issue of the people. And I actually think that all those plans to make these people better managers is the wrong approach, because there are examples of organizations that just do away with that ladder. They
Mhm.
literally don't have the ladder, or the ladder's really, really flat, like
Yes,
three rungs.
yes.
So, and some of those companies have been doing this incredibly well for a long time and are big, big companies. I mean,
Hmm.
the company that makes Gore-Tex, the
Yeah,
material,
yeah.
yeah, they're one of them,
Hmm.
and they've been going since the 1950s on that basis. So,
That requires a company to be different, right? To be different from the
yeah,
norm.
absolutely. And it can work. And there are examples around the world in all sorts of industries. The Netherlands is very famous for its the medical company, and I can't pronounce it, so you'll have to forgive me. Buurtzorg, um,
Hmm.
BWRTZORG.
I don't even know it.
Yeah, well, they provide like they provide a range of things, but they provide a lot of care in the community, and they have 17,000 employees and no bosses, no managers.
Maybe buurtzorg.
Buurtzorg, that's it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're amazing
Maybe.
in that way. Yes, they're absolutely, their model is so good that it's been studied by organizations, like medical organizations around the world.
Hmm.
Like, oh, how can we do that? Because they get great results for patients, they get great results for the people working inside,
Hmm.
and they're saving money. So it's like, wow.
Yeah, win, 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 right?
Absolutely. And there's examples like that everywhere. And the moment that you remove some of those crappy systems, like the hierarchy, people start to behave like people.
Yes.
And, then they can be good people.
Yeah, because a lot of people are still trapped in the power struggle, or they become power hungry, and it's the ass kissing and the down kicking that's happening a lot. It's going up the ladder at the cost of other people. That's what
Yeah.
happening a lot, and a lot of people are afraid to stand up for it. Or to stand up for themselves. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to lose their job. There's a lot of fear in companies like this. But we also have, I also worked for an IT company that saw its employees as the most valuable asset. And
Mm-hmm.
that's often something that's wrong with corporate. They think that employees are dispendable. I'll fire you and hire 10 of you for tomorrow I'll hire 10 new ones for you, right? You're dispensable. You're not important enough. But that's not true. And well, when you treat your employees as the most important thing in your business, then that also makes it that people feel hard for the business, that they are willing to go the extra mile, that they are willing to come up with creative ideas, that they feel more a part or connected or consulted within the business or the direction of the business or the products that the business is making, which leads to better job satisfaction, more happiness, less stress, better results, usually better money. But it's very difficult, apparently, for a lot of corporations to view it in that light.
Yes, and I think there is it's been a development process, and there are some great models out there that try to describe that basically, if you go back, few hundred years, most organizations, they didn't have corporates, but like most organizations were, very much very hierarchical, and you kick down so that you could sit up, and you had to, because you literally would die otherwise. You wouldn't have food to survive. And that's often described as like a wolf pack,
Yeah.
behave like a wolf pack. And then, or like criminal organizations, they behave like that. The mafia, they behave like that. And then as part of, societal evolution, newer kinds of organizations have evolved, some that are more based on merits, and then they have evolved more and more. And I think we're just at a stage now where an even newer type can evolve. And it just hasn't entered into enough of the normal way of doing things yet, so that it still looks different. But if you think about it, the fact that most countries these days have, you know, workers' rights protection to some degree. Most
Hmm.
countries these days have, most people have the notion that you should work vaguely between 9 and 5. That you shouldn't work 20 hours a day. That's quite new. That
Hmm.
most organizations will say, well, yes, of course you get some time off, you get weekends off or whatever. That's again, it's very new.
Yes.
That didn't exist 150 years
No,
ago.
in the old days, they worked 7 days a week.
Yeah, that was it. So you see things are evolving, and
Yes.
it's also the historian in me that always goes like, okay, what has happened in history? And we are moving slowly, but there is still, as you say, a lot of fear in that system
Hmm.
because these new ways are too new. And what I see in my work when I work with corporates is that I meet these passionate managers who genuinely care for their people. They're leaders and they genuinely want good things for their leaders. And I say to them, look, you spend so much time and effort and money on hiring people,
Yeah.
yeah, but then you treat them like they're children. You don't give them
Yeah.
authority. And a lot of them start to go like, yeah, that's wrong. And it's a case of then finding ways how they can change without being too scared. And that's different every single time, but it is a bit like, you know, you can't tell, I don't know, if you have a teenager, you can't tell them what to do.
Hmm.
You have to help them find their ways. And not that I'm calling these leaders teenagers, but you can't just tell somebody what to do because then you're just becoming like one of the old bosses.
Yes. And what I also saw, because in IT, at one point, I was what we call an agile coach. So agile is a specific way of working. It's a new way of tackling projects. And we were hired to help organizations work more in the agile way.
Yeah.
So that means that you're working with the board of directors and you're working on a very high level. And it means that you need to completely change the way they operate, the way they work, the way they look at things, the processes, everything. But what I also saw was that a lot of business owners have difficulty in letting go of the familiar. They hire you because they want change. And sometimes I was thinking, do you actually want change, or do you think you need to go with the movement?
Yeah. Yeah.
Apply this, but do you actually really want it? Or is it more like a fashion
Yeah.
thing that you're doing? And then you encounter resistance and you want to help them work in a new way, create new processes, a new way of thinking, but they're sort of stuck in the
Yeah.
old way of thinking.
And this is the thing. I mean, yeah, I've seen so many trends and fads. There was before agile, there was lean,
Mhm.
and before that was at some point just in time, and before that was TQM, and before, and there's all these things and great concepts. And I do think the agile concept is amazing, actually,
Yes.
and it has a lot of aspects that I 100% subscribe to.
Mhm.
But the problem is when you take any of these concepts and just throw them onto a company per se, and the company thinks they need to have the concept, and then they will follow like a recipe, it ignores the fact that every organization, from the biggest part down to the smallest team, is shaped by humans.
Yes.
And they all have a different background, they have history, they have different assumptions, motivations, values, all of these kind of things. And that you can't just do it. You have to be really sensible in terms of adapting to
Mhm.
the different situations. And sometimes that means going faster, sometimes means going slower. But I know that whenever it comes to one of these trends, the bosses say, no, 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 we want this.
Yeah.
We want the thing that made Google big, you know.
Everybody's doing this, and so we want it too.
Yeah. Without having confidence in themselves that actually we want to learn what works there and then make it our own, but different, make it work for us. And
Yes.
that is a lack of confidence, really,
Hmm. Yes.
which they
And
won't
a
admit.
lack of knowledge. Yes, exactly. So how can corporates help change the world then?
Well, the way that I approach it is I work with corporates. I obviously work with the kind of who want to do some changing. And I know that as I help the people I work with become happier, a bit like you described earlier, just more job satisfaction, happier in the work, they start making different decisions. And research has shown that the happier people are at work, the more ethical their decisions. And the
Okay.
more ethical, not just for their company, but for society around them. And when I first read that research, my mind was blown. Because just think, if you just imagine you're the manager at a manufacturing plant that produces wastewater, and you have the choice to buy new filters or let the old crappy ones still go for a number of years and pollute the water a bit. Who
Hmm.
cares? Yes. The research shows that if you are somebody who's happy at their work, you're more likely to make the decision to go and install the new filters.
Yes.
And that kind of effect is phenomenal,
Hmm.
because all of a sudden people would make such different decisions compared to the bad ones they're making at the moment. They would consider, is their supply chain, does it include manufacturing that uses child labor? The, should they pollute? Should they do this? Should they do that? They would really just make different decisions. And that is how I know corporates can change the world. Because
Hmm.
the moment that Apple decides not to use certain factories in China that does expose children to toxic waste, guess what? That will change really quickly.
Oh, that's exactly right. I always give the example of meat or chicken, for instance.
Mm,
You have these companies who uh, are cruel to animals, put them
yeah,
in small cages,
yeah,
and they're just only fed enough to have them fat enough to be butchered to produce meat. And they do that on such a large scale that the meat is often a lot cheaper. The large production, but the animals are in shitty conditions and they're inhumane and
yeah,
treated really, really badly. And they do that because meat is expensive, and people, if they have the choice, they will buy the cheaper one over the more expensive one, because life is expensive and life is becoming more expensive by the day. So if people have the choice, they will buy that. And on the other hand, we have all these activists that say, oh, but this is animal cruelty and we don't want that. And then the people that buy that meat agree, they also think it's animal cruelty, and they also think this should be stopped, but they're also looking at their wallet and thinking, but I cannot afford the more expensive part, so I'm buying this cheap one. So and the same type of discussion I often have with people who say they are vegetarian. Then they are not vegetarian because they're against meat, but they're vegetarian because of the animal cruelty, and they
mhm,
think by not eating meat anymore that they will stop the animal cruelty. But that's not happening, because there's still lots of people who are buying the cheap meat because that's the thing that they can afford. So it doesn't make any difference. So if we want to make a statement, if we really want to change all of this, I think it's a twofold way. On the one hand, I think other meat needs to become cheaper so that it's
mm.
easily affordable for other people. And we massively should boycott the people that are producing the cheap meat, because if nobody buys it, what's the point of producing it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But as you say, if somebody um, has the choice to not eat, or and let's not say meat, because you could arguably live without meat, but let's say get the better flour for bread or something like that, something that is a staple that you kind of do need. It becomes very, very difficult. But that's also because a lot of food production, the way it's done, is over, what's the right word? It's over processed. So it's not the food is over processed, but the way how the industry works. There's
Yeah.
incredible amount of waste in these big organizations, and I don't mean food waste. I mean effort waste. And you could argue, well, okay, but that means lots of people are employed, but they're not really adding real value to anything. And we all know about, we've all heard about the inefficiencies in corporates, when
Yes.
you complain about anything, computer says no, and people have no power to actually make any changes. So in the food industry, as in many other industries as well, there is huge chains of wasted effort that get paid for. And then, of course, you have, the huge discrepancy between and growing discrepancy between what the top levels are earning versus the average workers, who, by the
Yes.
way, can't afford proper food.
Well, that's it, right? Because in the whole pandemic area, for instance, our largest supermarket chain made even more profit than the years before Corona, while most people couldn't even afford to pay for their groceries anymore. There's something inherently wrong with that. People cannot afford their life necessities. Vegetables and stuff like that, while the people that are selling the vegetables are becoming richer and richer.
Well, yeah, not the actual people, just a few of them.
Mhm.
And it is a systemic issue, because if you look at the gap between the top payers, like the CEO pay, and the average employee in an organization, back in the 70s, it was something like, I can't remember. I think it was like 70 times as much than the lowest paid one. So if the lowest paid got paid €1, the CEO would get 70, and fine.
Mhm.
But by now, that's over 1,000,
Yes.
and it's that gap. I'm perfectly fine with the fact that people get paid differently depending on what they do.
Yes.
But as in everything in life, there is a balance, and
Mhm.
it's come out of balance, and that is why you have that incredible amount of wasted effort, that's just pump money into these organizations, which, by the way, the people working in those jobs aren't happy either, because
No.
they're not actually contributing value. And yet the organizations know themselves that they're not doing all the things that they could be doing. So it's like really messy.
Yes, exactly. They're working to pay the bills, not because it feeds their soul.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there is, however, a lot that can be done. So, for example, I've got one client who is in the infrastructure construction industry. And the team that I work with is a very large team. They're amazing because they're so engaged. They're so interested. And I mean, we're talking exciting things like building a motorway, or or building a train, or building bridge. But they are passionate, like, okay, how can we reduce CO2 emissions? How can we make building these things greener? How can we provide better solutions than sticking more trucks onto the road? How can we, so they're really thinking about this the whole time,
Mhm.
because they are truly engaged, and they have trimmed off all the fat from their teams. So they don't have 50 support people. They
Mhm.
brought those support people up and said, like, look, these people have great ideas too. Let's bring them to
Mhm.
the table and let's work together, which, is great to say because it makes a tangible difference.
Yes, exactly. And you're stealing a little bit of my win, because my next question was indeed going to be, how do you see that changing? What type of solutions are there? And this is one example, but are there more things that people can be doing or corporates could be doing to really have a positive impact on the world?
Oh, of course. I mean, to be honest, we would be here next year still if I listed all the ways it could be out. But there are so many different ways, from the way that organizations, that corporates manufacture, to the way they structure their supply chains, the way they structure themselves internally for pay. So, for example, some of these organizations that I mentioned earlier that have done away with hierarchy, they don't have huge bloated HR and finance departments anymore.
Mhm.
Who, and I've worked in finance departments and I've worked with HR between where there was there was a lot of jobs that you go, no human should be doing this. This is,
Mhm.
crazy. And then those departments are asked to add value, and then they come up with some great ideas in terms of how to put more policies or more processes to take away even more control from the people doing the work.
Yeah.
And that's just insane. And you can get rid of a lot of that and actually free up potential and talent and creativity.
Mhm. Yeah, that's another thing I see being wrong with society. A lot of people work because it pays the bills. They don't work because it gives them energy or it gives them joy or because it lights them up or because it feeds their soul. And that's also being promoted, especially when you lose your job. But here in the Netherlands, and I'm hearing that in different countries as well, is you're being pushed to find a job as quickly as possible so that you're self-serving again. But
Mm,
if that's a job that fits you, if it's a job that you like, actually, that's not important.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's been bigger debates around should there be universal income, should there be
Mhm.
other methods like that, which slightly beyond the scope of this today. But I do think society can definitely do better, and I
Yes.
do think, and I've seen it because I've seen it, corporates can lead on that.
Hmm.
And that's why really want people who are passionate about their topic. So my topic is all around engaging humans and releasing their potential. But doesn't matter what your topic is. If you're passionate about your topic that helps humans, getting into corporates, you can start creating that chain of change, that
Yes.
you can be the first one, like knocking on that domino chain that I always think of. You tip one and then all the others
Yeah,
slowly
they
start to
fall. Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah, it needs to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I think that this is also where rehumanizing work fits in, right?
Yes. Right. Yes. Very much so. That's my hashtag, which basically summarizes the idea that if we make work, or if we help organizations make the work that their people do more fit for humans, so not soul destroying, not energy sucking, not mind numbing, but
Yeah.
actually having some purpose, having some link to creating real value, having human connections in there as well, being treated, and this is probably my biggest one, being treated like adults at work
Mm.
and not like naughty children. Because, most people employed are over 18. They should not be
Mm.
treated like naughty children. And being treated with respect, then people can start to flourish more at work, and they can bring their creativity and their ideas and their compassion and their all of those good things into work,
Hmm.
and that creates a better workplace, and
Yes.
that then leads to the better ethical decisions.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's is circle back to what we talked about in the beginning, where you see your employees as the most valuable asset in your business. And for the IT company I worked for, that looked like they had a room where there was, I think, two bunk beds were in there. So if you
Okay.
were tired during the day, you could take a nap because they realized that when you are feeling tired for whatever reason, it's better to take a power nap of 30 minutes and then come back fresh and maybe tackle the problem instead of just forcing yourself to go on and become tired and more tired and your brain stops working and the solution never comes.
Yeah.
Or we had a game room where there was a ping pong table and a football table and I think a Nintendo Wii with games, also to promote friendships
Mhm.
among co-workers, or at least doing other things than just working, getting to know each other on a different level, so that you can also work together in a very different way. And when your boss, your employer, facilitates things like this and even promotes you using them because they see the value of it and they see how it makes you more valuable, you are much more inclined to want to repay that kindness and do back, give back.
Yes, absolutely. Although I should caution that, like the games room, for example, and the bunk beds, that might have worked really well for the company that you described because it was that kind of company,
Yes.
you know. And I've seen it and it works amazingly. I've also seen where other companies have just like, oh well, we'll install a game room, we do this, and that was so alien to them. And what they didn't understand is that it wasn't actually about the games room. It
Hmm.
was about the fact that the leadership decided, okay, we're going to give our people the freedom to choose to do different things. We're going to make it easy for them to hang out with other people.
Hmm.
In this case, happens to be a games room because people are gamers, right? Um, but it could be something completely different.
Yes.
But it was actually really treating people like adults and like, okay, we're not going to micromanage them. We're not going to monitor that they sit at the desk and, measuring the keystrokes that they're using. We're going to treat them, like humans, and we're treating them like adults. We're giving them the freedom, and that works. Sometimes organizations miss that and they just take the thing rather than the intention.
The philosophy behind it.
Yeah.
Yes,
So I
exactly.
remember in the early 2010s, there was this big craze here in London, and I think it would happen in a few other places too, where fancy offices, including of very staid lawyers and accountants, would install slides between um, floors so
Hmm.
that people, because that was to be the hip and trendy thing. And I think Google had done it, and they're like, oh well, if we just have an office slide, then everybody will be cool and creative and innovative like in Google. And you go, what? How? That is not reading the culture at all. And
No.
obviously it was a massive flop,
Yeah.
um, quite rightly so. So it is a case of like understanding what is the intention behind and
Yes.
going with that, and then see what actually fits to the culture of the organization.
I understand what you mean. And it's indeed because most programmers are more on the autistic side, and they are usually avid gamers, both physical gamers or online gamers.
Yeah.
And because programming requires a lot of the mental capacities
Hmm.
that can tire you out when you use your brain too much, then it's good to have a physical counterpart against it, where you can do physical games with each other that promote both the relaxation of the brain as well as play into the type of people that are working for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Exactly. Yeah.
exactly. And it is indeed very important, because if you install those slides and everybody that works there are women with pencil skirts, for instance, they will never ever
Exactly.
go down the slide, right?
Exactly. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Yes.
And I like fun as much as the next person, but
Yes.
even I'd go like, do I really want to do that at work?
Hmm.
Not sure.
Yeah, and what you said about the micromanagement and giving people things, that's how a natural, highly sensitive person or a natural empath works. For me, you just need to tell me what you want done and by what time you want it done, and then let me figure out the rest. And I will not only have it done on time, it's probably early, and probably I would have done four things on the side that were connected to it, because you let me do what I do best instead of micromanaging me and having second guessing all my choices, or trying to force me to make certain choices that are not what I can stand behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is again where it comes back to what we said at the beginning about leaders need to have confidence in themselves
Hmm.
to know when they need to be more hands-on, because if somebody's new, they might need more, guidance and direction,
Yes.
and when to step back and when to just shut up completely.
Hmm.
So, because there's definitely a case in point. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember my last corporate job. Um, as I was CFO, and blimey, do not ask me tax questions. That was never my strength, never
No.
wanted to. So I just made sure that I had people around me who were really, really good with that kind of stuff. And
Yes.
I was like, okay, the board, you have a tax question. Here, this is the person who knows all about it.
Yes.
And I would bring these people up and just shut up myself.
That's exactly what I do with the clients that come into my practice. I call that teaching them or helping them get familiar with their user manual.
Yeah.
What are you good at? What are you not good at? And also, especially also as a business owner, this is very important to know, because if you do not have a mind for numbers, then outsource your books and your taxes and all of those things. And if you are not a techie person, like so many healers are, for instance, outsource your techie stuff to someone who loves it. So I think both in the corporate world as well as the self-employed world, I think it all boils down to um, being a human,
Yeah.
knowing your human qualities,
Yeah.
and acting like them,
Yeah.
acting
As
accordingly.
it, as simple as that. There you go. We've just changed the world.
Yes, I love it. So, for you viewers, listeners out there that are following our conversation today, I would love to hear your input on this topic. Either what are your thoughts around it, or based on what we've spoken about until this moment, what is your key takeaway or your biggest insight? And we would love it if you could share that in the comments below. I would also love it if you could subscribe to this channel so you'll never miss another video again. And if you're already doing all of these things, thank you. Then maybe also consider sharing this episode with your tribe, with your people, because we need to bring this out into the open. We need to create awareness. This needs to become a movement. And for that, this message needs to be shared. So you would not only be doing us a favor, but you will be doing mankind and the world a favor.
Literally changing the world. That's exactly it. I'm passionate about creating this movement, pushing it forward as much as possible, because obviously nobody can do this by themselves.
No.
But I see it, I can see it with my own eyes. I see it in the organizations I work in, I see it in the organization my clients work in. The positive impact is incredible. And we can have that ripple effect. And, we just have to get
Yes.
started. Yeah.
Exactly. It all starts with you. Everything. Change starts with you. Whatever the change is, it doesn't matter. It starts with you. So I can also imagine that after listening to this and you have some thoughts, or maybe you have some questions and you think, well, where can I find Miriam? Because I'd love to pick her brain or talk to her or hire her, maybe even. So where can people find you, Miriam?
Well, the places I'm most active on is on Facebook and on Instagram. I do have LinkedIn as well, so you can find me as Miriam R. Gilbert on Instagram. There is a website which, between you and me and everybody else here, I need to update a bit. Uh, but that is www.impactfulnesslab.com. I would love and welcome any questions, any comments, anybody else with a passion to make a huge impact and quite good money, to be honest, as well with corporate clients. Do get in touch. I even have got a free course that people can access anytime, which is all around how to set yourself up as a six-figure corporate coach. So I'm happy to share that so people can actually get started. And I know people who have literally taken the free course and gotten themselves clients and then gotten amazing feedback from those clients.
Wow.
So they made a real difference to corporate teams, which is I'm
I love that.
yeah.
So don't worry if you thought I didn't quite catch that or that went too fast. I will make sure that all of the links can be found in the show notes, probably below this video or sometimes to the sides or up, but definitely somewhere around here. All the links that Miriam just mentioned will be in there, as well as my own links will be in there. So reach out. I think that's my message. And for today, I want to thank you, of course, listener, viewer, for being here, for following this talk, but especially you, Miriam, for talking about this important topic, by talking about this movement, and by being one of its front runners. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Barbara, for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love the conversation. I could carry on and on and on talking about this,
Right.
but it's been really, really fabulous. So thank you.
Thank you. So then there's nothing left for me to say to everybody, but have a really great rest of your day. And I'll see you again with a new guest for a new amazing topic and some wonderful new discussions in our next episode. For right now, have an amazing rest of your day, and until next time.